Dragon Age the Veil God completely ruined any shot for AAA redemption in 2024. All year we saw woke game after woke game get completely destroyed, and each time their media cheerleaders would dance around the obvious. But hero shooters cannot succeed anymore. Marvel Rivals, massive beta. But live service looter shooters are saturated. First Descendant, massive release. The games industry is in a bad place. People aren't buying single-player games anymore. Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong. It is an unknown IP. The market is saturated. Gamers just don't have money because of the economy. Blah, blah, blah. This year has thousands of articles trying to defend the failure of games whose narrative and visual design is decided in a corporate DEI department by blaming everything other than the herd of elephants that are the only thing left in the AAA room. Yet it wasn't Veilguard, Star Wars Outlaws, Kill the Justice League, Unknown 9, or anything else that was the expected salvation. One particular game manifested everything they believe in, like the second coming of The Last of Us 2. Sony used to be a Japanese company, well known for a breadth of video games, but since it moved offices to California, it also changed its values to match. And both Sony and Xbox are now colluding for years to push this ideology on gamers, infecting and closing more and more studios as we see the same themes, stories, characters, and modern audience conflicts play out over and over. A decade and $400 million made one particular copy-pasted masterpiece, while consultant allies did all they could to prop it up. Concord was the most important game for the woke to win of all time. In the year they needed a win the most, balanced between their continued relevance and a complete loss of legitimacy. Evil can never create. It can only corrupt what good men have made. Woke creatives, an oxymoron of the century, are only ever able to take an IP someone else has popularized, often over decades, and destroy it. That brief period after they gain control is the sole time they have any success. Yet it never takes long to become garbage. There's never appreciation or respect from the new custodians. As soon as they start to warp it to fit their ideology, they betray both original creators and longtime audience. Every single time. It follows a downward trajectory. And yes, every single case. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, comic books, the DCU and MCU, AAA Western game studios, Lord of the Rings, and soon anime and manga once Sony gets their paws on all of it. When the DEI agenda is involved, it is inevitable, and the only question is, how many products before it declines, before the average fan notices the collapse? And it is so incredibly obvious and awful that fans do notice. No, not just content creators. It is not culture war that turns people off. Most people do not pay attention to any of this. They don't know this is happening. This is purely a response to a complete degradation of that borrowed franchise by its new caretakers that happens every single time. So where does Concord come in? It's a totally new product and IP. That is the precise reason Concord is so important. Concord had Sony's backing. It had numerous devs, reportedly up to $400 million behind it. It had every single reason to succeed, if any new IP ever could. And it came out in the perfect time for success, with Palworld, Helldivers 2, Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, and more games with unknown or little-known IPs behind them, all finding unexpectedly high success out of nowhere, proving to all, without any doubt, that a brand new IP absolutely can succeed. Concord was rife, top to bottom, with wokeness. It had pronouns as the most important stat on the character sheet. Every character was a diversity hire. Their outfits had nothing masculine, cool, or sexy about them. This was the game that if a perfect AI were given 1,000,000 years to create the most woke game in existence, it would make Dustborn, but Concord would be somewhere along the way. This game is their Mona Lisa, and if it were successful, it would prove a fully original, completely woke game could make it as a mainstream, popular title. And there would be no denying it, due to how openly it cloaked itself in ideology. However, if it failed, or worse, bombed so horrifically it was shut down in just 2 weeks, it would still be a symbol of how a woke game with its own IP will always fare. And that is what happened. This failure cemented their toxic views cannot succeed without life support from a major government or corporation. It came at the worst possible time, a year when activists are failing catastrophically, and so many games made without this agenda are blowing away all expectations, at a time when journalists are being called out for their corruption, and the year when activist consultants have been revealed and their entire grift is falling apart rapidly. At a time when everyone is getting tired of the forced lecturing and being looked down on by spoiled establishment douchebags from ultra-rich cities acting like elitist pricks in every single form of entertainment. This was one last chance for them to show to both the audience and the investors that a woke game can succeed. Instead, it lost $400 million. If this failure cannot get executives, investors, and developers to realize that DEI is a massive failure, that gamers don't want smug preaching from an unwanted anti-freedom cult in everything, nothing can. Most importantly, 2024, let everyone else know you are normal. You aren't the only one questioning type A or type B replacing male and female. You are not the only one who notices decades-old IPs are having their characters completely changed, with stories, personalities, identity swaps, and so on being altered, always the exact same way, always to push thinly veiled political ideology of talentless narrative developers. Concord was needed to legitimize their rule, and instead it overthrew it from within. If it still had 100,000 concurrent players and was bragging about making $1 billion, journalists would be using it to drown out any criticism of all other woke failures this year. It would be the only thing you would hear of, and it would be sweeping the Game Awards. Instead, Concord, Dustborn, pure woke games can barely manage a few hundred players. Star Wars Outlaws, Dragon Age the Veilguard, Kill the Justice League. The new IP holders openly consider the past to be problematic. They openly hate the creators, they hate the fans. Each release in these IPs reduce the audience, an audience that is massive, that has been built up by talented people who had a lot of passion and a lot of love for what they're doing, until sometimes these decades-old IPs are destroyed entirely. Dragon Age is likely dead. The Arkham series won't be recovering. And as much as Ubisoft adores unending sequels, they'll be giving up on a Star Wars series after a single release. Concord was their chance to prove they can do it. They don't need the government. They don't need someone else's work. They don't need those nasty, old-fashioned creators they hate so much to make something for them. They were given so much money, so much time, and they blew it beautifully and proved to everyone just how well they can do with the best situation they could ever be in.